Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Sean, and welcome back to yet another episode of Op die Kruis. So, we are still busy with our 7-week Let's Beat Addiction series. I hope all of you guys are doing superb, and today we are going to talk about walls. What am I talking about? Let's chat to Brent and find out what he has to say about walls.
I don't know when I first began to build a wall. I think it's when I realized that I wanted to keep people out of my life by building a simple wall that would be a kind of boundary, a protection to keep people out of my life. At first the wall was only knee high. It was quite attractive. It was made of precious stones that I had found in my life, native stones. The wall was so small that some people didn't seem to notice and would stumble right over it and fall flat on their faces. Others would step over it and come very close to me, and this made me feel uncomfortable. So I built the wall higher. The higher wall was really much better, but I found that some people would come and rest their arms on the wall while they talked to me, and some stayed too long. They weren't my kind of people. And even when I edged the wall, the sharp stones, they didn't even seem to notice. One day, one of them vaulted right over the wall and stood inside. And this really made me so angry. So I built the wall higher. As I continued to build, I became more and more self-sufficient. And soon, no one could see in, and I couldn't see out. And then I realized that no one had stopped to talk for some time. Some walked by not even noticing my wall, and others stood sadly by and watched me build. I thought that they were jealous of me, of my wall, and I resented them. All of them. Some of my stones, you see, were very precious to me. I had polished them carefully several times a day. Then one day I realized that the wall was so high that I no longer saw or heard anyone. Is there anyone there? I yelled. There was no answer. It was dark and lonely. Even the air smelled bad. It was almost as though it was as if death could have a smell. Something was dying in me. I stayed there for a long time. It was quiet and dark and very lonely and empty. Only the whispers of my memories could be heard, if there was anything to be heard. One day someone yelled from the other side, "Your wall is ugly. It's twisted and it's grey and it's misshapen." I didn't want to hear this because I liked my wall. In fact, some of those stones were very precious, and I used them to build it. I was proud of my wall. It was the day that the flower fell at my feet. That I began to cry. I ran to the wall and I climbed to see who had thrown it over. But by the time I reached the top, no one was there. I returned to the flower. And I sat looking at its perfection. And I began to see the folly of my wall and its perfection. It was so perfect, this flower. Every part of it. And in comparison, my wall was so ugly. Floods of tears brought me to my knees. I am so alone. My wall is so high and so ugly, so big. I have nothing left. Won't someone help me? Please. Help! Then a strange thing happened. Something inside me stirred, like a remembrance of peaceful times that had passed way back somewhere in my life. And in the stillness of my broken world, I knew God was there. A blessed presence, that God would come to me, that He would come into my darkness. His light had penetrated my darkness. I stood in the joy of His presence. And I knew that He had watched me build my wall, and that He had waited patiently for me to see. It was really a selfish waste of time. And finally it occurred to me that He could tell me why my wall was so ugly. It was when I began to ask, that he began to teach me. And he gave the stones names. This stone is jealousy. You must remove it. Sometimes I would protest. This was one of my favorite stones. I had saved it and cherished it and polished it for many years, but when I was finally ready, he helped me to remove the stone. And so it went through the other stones, named envy, disillusionment, self-indulgence, childishness, stubbornness, lust. Sometimes with God's help, and sometimes with the help of strangers, we moved stones. And as we removed more stones, the light became visible. It came in. It lit up the place where there was darkness. I even felt a hand reaching me through a hole in the wall. I got a fright. It just wanted to encourage me to carry on with the moving of stones. And then there was a stranger who walked in one day, and he told me how he had let God tear down his wall. And I told him how I had suffered and how I would never forget how forsaken and lonely I had felt inside my wall. Yes, he said, self-pity is a terrible thing. When he left, I found my stone of self-pity, and what do you know? It was wet with my tears. I dried it off and laid it with the other stones I had taken from the wall. Overwhelmed by all God had done for me and what he had taught me, I stood on a large remaining stone and began to tell anyone else who passed by what God had done for me. And I was appalled that no one actually seemed too interested to hear what I was saying. I noticed others working on their walls, and I ran over to plead with them to stop. But they wouldn't listen. In my frustration, I lay down on the stone I had stood upon. I lay face down on that very stone. It was extremely large, this particular one, and it was very highly polished. It was more than life size. Do you want the answer to your question? God asked me. Raise your head and look at the stone you are lying upon. I raised my head and I caught my breath. I gasped and I saw my own reflection in the massive stone, and suddenly I realized I knew the name of the stone. It was pride. Then God said a strange thing. You must go and forget the stone. Remove it as far as possible from yourself. And then he said, I want you to go. And I will go with you. And I will stay here, he said. I protested to God by telling him that there were still more stones to remove. I wanted him here. Then God answered, I said, I will go with you. Do you remember the flower that fell at your feet and the hand that reached through the hole in the wall to encourage you? The stranger who showed you his self-pity? Ah, yes. I remember. I thought to myself and said to him, then you must go and do likewise. For to whom much is given, much is expected. Wherever you go, I will go with you. And whenever you come back here to be tempted or to remove more stones, I will be here with you, helping you go through the process. And so I went out. I saw the walls of others, and when I could, I threw a flower over. I reached through holes in walls at times to try and encourage them the way I was encouraged. And those walls were unbelievably ugly. I heard great sobs of people crying behind their walls, and my heart ached. I even cried out to God one day, won't you please help this person, as I heard him weep in his loneliness. And later I returned to my wall, and God, the blessed presence, was there. And together we removed the stones of fear, mistrust, indifference, ego. Then God said to me, now you're beginning to understand love. And everything that's going on here, it's all about love. Without love, my love, he said to me, in you and for others, the things I have told you would be meaningless. You'll begin to live in peace and understanding of all those people around you whom you thought were not your kind of people. I sent them into your life. And so it was. I went forth reaching out, sometimes just waiting beside somebody's wall, just on the outside of it, right there, and I would toss a flower. And sometimes I'd grab a hand through a wall, through a hole.